G'day guys, Brendan from Tackle Tactics here. It's been a long time between videos, but I'm back creating this video because I've had a lot of interest and a lot of questions regarding how to fish these little guys. The cut down Zman finesse worm rigged on a TT NedlockZ Jighead. Specifically how to fish them from the beach. So this video will cover the tackle, the technique, and also how to select the right beach conditions so that you can actually use this technique effectively. So, the lure, finesse worms. Why do I cut them down? They come in a 4-inch size already. So why am I cutting them down to a smaller size? And why am I rigging them on a NedlockZ Jighead? Well, that larger size lure is great, especially if you use the whiting rig, which is available via TT. And that gives you basically a stinger hook that attaches to the top of one of these 4-inch lures, and a standard jig head, or kind of like a NedlockZ Jighead, which sits on the base of it. So you have a stinger at the top and a NedlockZ style jig head at the base. The reason I don't fish that off the beach is I just want a smaller lure that's more compact, will cast further on light line, and just with the single hook I find I'm pinning my fish mainly in that top lip. I can quickly remove that hook and get that fish back in the water very quickly. So, jig heads. I fish one hook size. So a size 1 NedlockZ is the perfect size for that cut down finesse worm. But I have 2 weight options depending on how much current there might be in the gutter that I'm fishing or the depth that I'm fishing. I'll generally start with this top one here, which is a 1/10 ounce jig head. And then if I'm not really keeping contact with the lure, or the waves are just washing my lure back in way too quick, I'm not getting bites, I'll up it to the 1/6 ounce and see how that goes. Generally, start light, go heavier if you need. I haven't really needed to fish any heavier or lighter than those 2 jig heads for the areas that I'm fishing. Okay, so rigging these finesse worms. So colour of the finesse worm, personal preference. Colour of the NedlockZ Jighead, also personal preference. I like the orange. We all know old school fishermen who fish for whiting off the beach like the red bead in front of a worm. So I just like the orange one. It provides a little bit more of a reaction bite or strike trigger. These finesse worms straight out of the pack, you can see how much they cut down here to fit that size 1 NedlockZ. There's a notch in the plastic. I don't know how well you can see it there, but there's a notch in that 4-inch plastic that I tend to cut through. Tend to cut it more towards the tail end of the plastic through that kind of change in texture. So it's real ribbed and whatnot there, and then it goes kind of smooth, and then back to ribbed. So that's where I'm making that cut. I just use a pair of braid scissors, cut straight through, nothing fancy. So that's the section I'm not using. This is the section I am using. And then this is going to be horrible to try and get at first go, because it can be a little tricky, but I'm trying my best to feed that through the NedlockZ and keeping it as straight as I possibly can. We'll see how I went. Not too bad. So there we go. There's a rigged cut down finesse worm on a TT NedlockZ Jighead. Ready to go. Okay, so the tackle that I use. This is an ultralight technique. I fish light line, so I'm only fishing 6-pound line, and the reason for that is 1, casting distance with a light lure, 2, bite detection, if you really start upping that tackle much more, you do start to lose your casting distance. And look, you're not targeting massive trophy fish doing this technique. It's more about the numbers. 2500 reel, I like that just for a little bit more line retrieve, especially off the beach, just to stay connected when, say, your line gets carried a little bit by a wave. You can pick that line back up a bit quicker with the 2500 as opposed to a 1000. I'm fishing a Black Mamba 1 to 3 kilo rod. Again, very light, and it's only 7 foot. Really, this is anyone's standard brim outfit for fishing an estuary, and you can back that outfit up and take it straight down the beach for this technique, which is fantastic. So when it comes to leader, I will have a bit of a range. Generally, more often than not, I'm fishing with 8 pound. So I've got the Platypus 8 pound fluorocarbon there. And that'll pretty much be my go-to, unless I'm fishing around quite heavy structure where I might be in the corner of a beach where I'm fishing along rocks as well. Then I might up it to, say, 10 pound, even 12 pound. I've caught fish doing this technique. Really, you're targeting brim. You will get flathead, you'll get dart, you'll get trevally. Especially if you start to find that the 8 pounds not enough to keep connected to flathead, then you might want to up your leader. But overall, I don't tend to have too much of an issue. Most of the fish are hooked in the top lip if you're quick with your strike once you feel the bite. Okay, so technique-wise, we want to be casting around depth changes. So we might be fishing the shore break right at our feet, and you could do a parallel cast down along that shore break, and that tends to work better when you've got a steeper gutter dropping away at your feet quite quickly. Or you may have a gutter with a defined sandbank further out, and you may be able to cast up onto that shallow sandbank and work your lure back down into the deeper gutter. It's that depth change and that area where you've got the most stirred up water, where your fish such as whiting, brim, flathead, dart, they'll push up onto those edges to feed. Retrieve-wise, it's basically a shake. So the idea is to impart as much action into the lure and keep it in the strike zone as long as possible. We don't want big flathead rips where we're basically, big, sharp twitches where that lure's popping right off the bottom and hopping back down. We don't need that. We just want to keep it close to the bottom and shake the lure as much as you can while moving it the least physical distance you can. So small little hop or small little twitches of the rod, pause, small little twitches, pause. As soon as your line straightens or you see it change direction, strike. The quicker you strike, after you feel that bite, the more likely you are to pin the fish in the top of the lip or the side of the mouth. That's the best way to hook these fish because, especially if you need to release them, lure just pops straight out and fish can go straight back. The longer you leave it between detecting the bite and striking, the more likely that lure will end up inside the fish's mouth, not on the lip. Alright, so in order for this technique to be effective, you need to be fishing quite small swell. No point going out there battling through 2 metre swells with a lot of current ripping sideways through a gutter with a very light line setup and light lure. It's not going to work. So I'm really fishing around that 1 metre swell or less, and ideally in areas that are still stirred up in that smaller swell. So you might have a wave breaking over a sandbank, crashing into a gutter, and that water in that gutter on that sandbank edge is stirred up. They're the kind of areas I'm targeting. And generally, tide-wise depends on the beach you're fishing. You might have a beach that fishes better on a low tide because it allows you to access gutters that are not accessible or within casting range on a high tide. A lot of the best beaches I've found for this technique are that sort of situation where you're fishing a low tide gutter, which might only be 1 metre to 1.5 metres deep, but there's cover in the gutter because you've got nice stirred up water rolling into that gutter, so you've got whitewash throughout and the fish feed quite actively. You may also find your beach that you fish locally might be more suited to high tide. It might be a bit of a steeper shelving beach, which means as the tide comes in, the gutter's just filling upwards. It's not a gradual sloping beach where the water starts to rise significantly far up the beach. You know, when it's steeper and the tide's coming in, you might still be able to stand very close to that gutter and fish it that whole tide all the way up to the top. So you've got to really understand what your beach looks like, what type of structure your beach kind of has, and you've got to make a decision on what stage of the tide is going to be best for that beach that you fish. There's no right or wrong answer. Everyone has different views. But get out there, have a look at your beach, start thinking about those shallower washy areas where you could effectively fish a light tackle rig.
So we're just going to cast out to that sandbank there and work it back into this hole. Hopefully there's a flathead or two sitting in there, maybe even a bream. Nothing on that cast. So we'll try to get just a little bit further out. Right out there. Oh, I just had a bite then. They don't muck around in the surf. There we go, we're on. That was a real rattly little bite. Probably another flatty, yeah it is, you can see it just there in the surf. So that's that 3-inch or 4-inch finesse worm cut down to 3-inch on the TT NedlockZ. So there we go. He's a neat flatty. If you're looking for a feed, maybe he'd be legal, but there's that cut down finesse worms on that TT NedlockZ Jighead. I'm not keeping them for a feed, so I'll put this one back today.